Today, we're going to be laying out the story of Returnal. This story goes to some pretty dark places, so I'm going to lay this out as a content warning before we get into it. From the outset, the story of Returnal doesn't seem too horrifying. Selene is stuck on an alien planet after crash landing and needs to get home. That's a pretty typical sci-fi story if you've ever seen one, honestly. I mean, it's pretty horrifying if you put yourself in that situation, but it's not really a horror game premise itself. That is, until she finds the first body. Her own body. And then, upon experiencing her first death, she experiences the crash all over again. Imagine being stuck in a loop, forced to experience the same circumstances over and over with ever more deadly threats, and the only option you have is to keep pushing forwards in hopes that you can break free from the cycle of abuse. To start with, we'll be going through the story as the game presents it, including the DLC. And all the encounters Selene has to get everyone up to speed, and then I'll start piecing together the story with a timestamp down below if you just want to skip ahead to that part. We kick off the story with Selene flying down to a planet, tracking a signal called White Shadow. Approaching this planet appears to be forbidden, and almost like divine intervention, her ship Helios is almost immediately struck out of the sky. Awakening, we can see the planet does indeed have life, with trees towering over us and birds covering the sky. We also get the name of the planet, Atropos.
Crashed on Atropos.
Atropos is the name of one of the three fates in Greek mythology, the ancient old crones who were the personification of destiny. Ignoring the other two sisters for now, Atropos was known as the inflexible or inevitable one, as she chose the method of death and cut the thread of a person's destiny. Keep that theme in mind while we dive further into Selene's story. Also, to preface it now, a lot of the bosses and world is named after Greek mythology, and we'll get into why that's important later on. Selene tries to get into contact with Astra, but receives no answer, and leaves comms open in case anyone tries to contact her. Throughout her journey, Selene will begin to journal her experiences while she tries to uncover what the White Shadow signal is. As Selene abandons Helios, we can see there were structures here once. The doors still function, but the paths, the columns, the walls, everything is crumbling or in a state of disrepair. We can even find statues of the beings who created this place, crumbled or fallen over enough to see they were humanoids, but definitely not human. And then, one of the biggest mysteries and Selene's personal hell begin as she finds a body. It's her body. While obviously shaken up from this, Selene presses onwards to find the source of the signal with an almost single-minded determination. Even when shortly after she encounters her first real threat in the world, she doesn't falter. After easily dispatching these scavengers, the first of many, many different foes Selene will face, she finds a scout recording. It's her from another run, another timeline.
Scout log. Atropos. Elapsed time 30 minutes since last crash. Whole areas of this forest are rearranging themselves like a fluid puzzle after each of my... Whenever I return, per Astra protocol, I will not be recovered until I reach the broadcast signal. If you're hearing this, you are stuck here too.
Here she mentions for the first time that every time she comes back to the world is similar, but rearranged. And she won't be rescued by Astra until she can find the source of the signal. It confuses Selene though, as she's just got here. She doesn't remember recording this message. So it's most likely from a future version of herself. Selene also finds an artifact nearby that after scanning is revealed as an Atropian key. So, going forwards, I'll be calling the sentient race here the Atropians. It fits. Just in time too, as Selene actually finds some of these Atropians in a giant room. Unfortunately, none of them are in a state to explain what is going on. Bodies are piled up against the wall surrounding a deep pit and a giant pulsating ball of darkness, which I'm going to lovingly call the Heart of Darkness for now. Perhaps it has something to do with the next audio log we find of Selene's. She seems to have all but given up on escape in that iteration, but mentions that every time she's on the cusp of true death, tentacles reach out from the darkness to grab her and drag her, kicking and screaming, into a new iteration.
It is impossible to escape. I have tried everything. I'm always brought back by... There is a moment between death and rebirth when tentacles drag me down, screaming, drowning, returning.
Upon falling for the first time, we can see the smoke-like tentacles reach for Selene, dragging her through a confusing mixture of images including a modern-day astronaut and a burning farmhouse, both of which we'll dive into deeper later. Then Selene is subjected to the crash again, something she'll have to become used to as time goes on. If, after experiencing her first half-death, Selene decides to have a rest, then her dreams will be filled with the Heart of Darkness. At this point, Selene also witnesses the first rearranging of the environment her previous self had mentioned, and she also gains the ability to traverse the timelines to fight alongside an alternate version of herself. This is how they kind of got co-op put into the game, but it fits. Now, so far, Selene has been making do with her pistol, but upon an altar in what almost looks like a temple, we can find a Xenotype weapon. This is the Tachyomatic Carbine, the first of many, many weapons Selene will find. This, other than the doors and megastructures, is our first sign of any kind of tech from the Atropians. And thank God it's something she can use to defend against the fauna that's becoming more and more vicious each cycle. Now, the world does rearrange itself, but some things are always present. Like, for example, the giant wall. The white signal is on the other side, but Selene doesn't have any way to get over it. Luckily, Selene picked up some strange readings in the forest, so that's the best place to head next, I guess. Nearby, a log from a previous Selene talks about the signal. Do you see the white shadow is something personal to her? She doesn't know how anyone could know about it, especially deep in the middle of space. She also mentions the sentients, who are the Atropians. As Selene progresses further into the forest, she eventually falls into a crypt. While searching for a way out, Selene finds an Atropian with some xenotech still attached to them. And of course, her first thought is, let's just slap it on myself. Which also raises a question, how is the tech here so compatible with human technology? I mean, luckily for Selene, because this amazing bit of tech gives her the ability to access teleporters that are scattered across the map. Using the teleporters, Selene is able to access a pit stop, a foundry that is capable of creating other devices using the power of Oberlight. The more Atropian tech we find, the more obvious it becomes that it was massively more advanced than ours, but still compatible with Selene. Just in the next room, Selene finds her first written account by the Atropians. It is in a different language, though. It's obviously not going to be in English in the middle of space, although, given the fact they know about White Shadow, it could have been. So Selene needs to start collecting glyphs that are scattered around the map, so she can decipher the language. However, through the power of editing and Google, we can see the final translation at 78% accuracy is actually, our connection to our brethren is severed. Our agony is maddening. We cannot stop the endless cycle of violence to come. That's pretty ominous, honestly. But, as always, Selene presses onwards, discovering some kind of energy field she can't pass yet. But a signal leads her ever deeper. She soon also discovers a new species. These parasites feed on Selene's suit, but are symbiotic in their relationship, providing both beneficial and detrimental effects. Again, it's strange how everything on this planet seems compatible with Selene. Even the reconstructors are compatible with Selene despite her very, very obviously different proportions and biology. I mean, look at her, she literally fits in a leg hole. which is kind of terrifying in the implications for how big these guys were. Resurrecting her at the cost of a few ether. This resurrects her on the same timeline rather than when she's snatched from true death by the tentacles and brought into a changed place. As Selene explores further, searching for a way past the energy barrier, she comes upon a curious sight. It's a house. A house from Earth. A house from Earth. That is out here on Atropos in the middle of just deep space. How? Nearby, she finds a tape from herself talking about how she relives her own memories in the house, but they seem altered. It's not quite how things happened, they're almost manufactured. And it's the first mention of the astronaut Selene has been seeing in her dreams.
I think I am reliving my memories in that house, but not fully. They're corroded. Some parts are missing, others seem manufactured. But I can remember the torment, feeling like I was losing my mind. There's no comfort here, no safe space. And the astronaut keeps following me.
The door is locked to Selene for now, though, so as always, she must keep going forward, where she finds an archive for the past that the Atropians experienced. We can see them encountering the same hostile fauna and using the fabricator scattered around before finally building protective robots. Finding the signal source, Selene finds a large inactive teleporter and one of the automaton protectors. It's broken, but in its hand it holds a sword capable of disturbing that pesky barrier Selene has encountered so far. In a nearby room, Selene finds a new xenoglyph, which, when fully translated, becomes myriad eyes beholding in the longing dark, sunlight as it rains like pitch. We must leave for the waste where our visions have promised a new kind of transcendence. Glory, 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 etc., etc. On an altar in the same room, Selene finds the key to her house, so before going deeper, she needs to make a stop. We'll just let this bit play out.
Exactly as I left it. But impossible. This was taken after I left. Why? It should never be open. Open. Hello? Who is up there? I can't. Such strange markings. Where did
Just a few things to take away from that. Selene left this place before she left the planet. There's a door she's scared of opening. An astronaut is literally following her now, and the picture at the top of the stairs is just really creepy. And we'll keep that one in mind. Finally capable of tearing through the barrier, Selene finds the anathema key. Just before using it though, she finds another xenoglyph. Our brethren banned us from Citadel and sealed Frike and the others in the vaults, but it will not stop them from sending out their call and digging into our minds, making our nightmares real. Using the anathema key, we can descend to find Frike, the one who was banished to this vault. Finally overcoming the anathema Frike after many, many deaths, at least on my playthrough. Seriously, Frike is like... It's just such a steep learning curve. Frike is the first wall. After Frike, the rest of the game's pretty... I found it fairly easy. I finished... The run that I beat Frike, I managed to finish the entire thing. Well, like that run, and then... We'll get to that bit. Like, after Frike, I was able to complete Act 1. Once I've managed to beat him once, you can beat the rest of Act 1. Anyway... Selene recovers the Crimson Gateway key. She can finally access the large teleporter she found previously. This is the Crimson Waste. It's on the other side of the planet. Rather than the lush vegetation Selene was previously in, this is a barren wasteland. There's a new signal at the summit of nearby mountain, and with nothing else to go off of, Selene intends to ascend it. Nearby, a log describes how Selene needs to ascend the mountain as something at the top is summoning her, no matter how many deaths it takes. At the base of the mountain, Selene finds a log. There are sentients in the area, but they are driven by nothing but madness and violence since they became severed. Shortly afterwards, Selene encounters one of the severed for the first time. It's different to the bodies we've seen previously. These severed have almost vestigial wings upon their back, and one arm has become a similar mass of tentacles to what the wildlife is made of. As Selene makes her way up through the mountain, she encounters another of her logs. This Selene seems to be sinking into madness, possibly due to the Watcher in the deep below. But for now, her journey takes her in the opposite direction. We need to ascend. On her way, Selene encounters another archive room. We can find that the severed were the ones writing the xenoglyphs we've been deciphering. They also practiced wrapping themselves in the statues, as if they were preparing to go through a metamorphosis. And finally, they worshipped a pillar, whether through reverence or fear, isn't quite clear yet. But just before we hit the peak, there's two xenoglyphs in this area as well. The first one reads, "Our brother, the exalted one, hardened by suffering, climbed to the throne of the mountaintop. Its scythe, like a crescent moon, is poised to strike down the Creator-Destroyer. The pillars from deep below have judged us worthy." And the second, "Our connection to our brethren was destroyed when we descended into the abyss, and although we felt whole upon return, our brethren feared us." At the peak, we find the final xenoglyph, which, when translated, reads, "We saw countless arms reaching for the Creator-Destroyer. A creature we did not understand, but they were never satisfied. Even after countless feasts on its mind, by moving on it could escape without suffering for eternity." And finally, Selene encounters the Exalted One, Ixion. Just as an aside, in Greek mythology, Ixion was guilty of committing the first case of kinslaying, which is pretty interesting for their character, judging on the xenoglyphs we've read so far. After finally beating Ixion, Selene finds another piece of Xenotech, which is an amazing grappling hook. I love this thing. This also means Selene can now access the other gateway. She has finally found her way to the Citadel on the other side of the wall. Looks like the Severed managed to break in, and the Sentients aren't here. The city isn't completely abandoned though, as the automaton protections are still here. Nearby, Selene finds a xenoglyph. "We never meant for the war to destroy so much. We were only trying to communicate. But in the end, everything went too far. We should not have followed the Creator-Destroyer." Whilst working through the ruined citadel, Selene encounters another forge, one with a curious artifact on it. It's an astronaut figure, one that doesn't want to let us go. Shortly thereafter, Selene comes to a powered pylon with a suspicious hole in it. Showing absolutely no hesitation, as usual, Selene immediately shoves her whole arm into it and unlocks the tower. Seriously, she needs to just stop doing random, strange things. Entering the tower, Selene finds a log.
If Helios wasn't broken, we could prepare a strategy. The fact that his database retains my scans after each return, it's like he transcends time and space. I can't even tell what's real anymore. The endless fall, the giant with a face of flames. I always survive the shockwave and then die immediately afterwards.
And another archive. The hive mind, or original sentients, were defended by the automatons against the severed, who continued to wrap themselves and targeted even the buildings when they attacked. And high above those spires that they were worshipping, it was the creator-destroyer, the astronaut. And so begins Selene's ascent of the tower. The place is still mostly operational, filled with deadly traps and automatons in every room she visits. This place was created to stop the severed, not kill them, but all it did was slow them as they tore everything down. At the top, overlooking the city, we find another xenoglyph. We recognized that we played a role in this unsought genocide. The one with the burning face is all that is left of our final brother's mind. Only the Creator-Destroyer can now reach them if it is able to overcome the judgment that keeps it trapped in the cycle. Selene enters the top of the tower to finally confront the source of the White Shadow signal.
What is the truth behind White Shadow? Why do you repeat my buried past? How can you know? Out here in the void.
The last living sentient drags Selene into some kind of mindscape where she can confront the burning face, Nemesis, the last remnant of the hive mind. Side note, this fight felt so damn cool encountering it for the first time. You're like jumping from rock to rock as it's floating and you're fighting a giant burning face. It's really cool. Finally, Selene manages to take Nemesis down.
No more obstructions. Finally, I'll have an answer to White Shadow.
Astra received my signal. Then... that's it. White Shadow. You were how I escape.
You didn't think that was it, right, though?
No, I can't be here. I escaped. I was... Helios, you're still here too. Astra, is anyone listening? It's Selene. We're both trapped.
Selene lived her whole life, 63 beautiful years on Earth, after sending out the White Shadow signal to Astra and being rescued. But now, after a peaceful death, she's back on Atropos once again. But it definitely looks different. Nearby is a log from Selene, and she's starting to sound desperate.
I should have ignored this place all those years ago. I shouldn't have abandoned everyone to come here. Has nothing changed? I sat at the piano, and for once, I felt... The music is calling me now. How do I stop this? I don't want to become that woman who speaks madness with my voice.
Selene isn't looking too good, but thankfully there's a Foundry unit that can heal her in the next room. After which she mentioned that 63 years passed on Earth, but much, much longer has passed on Atropos. She's left to wonder how old Helios would be now. Selene finds the first body she stumbled upon all those years ago. It begins to sprout tentacles, just like all the wildlife here, and Selene is left to wonder if she's always been here. Heading further in, Selene hears a note from Don't Fear the Reaper and heads off to investigate, before once again encountering the house. A few things of note to take away from here. There was a picture of an older looking woman on the table labelled Fear, and Selene mentions not needing the medication lately. Also, after letting the astronaut in, Octo suddenly appears as well. And finally, the bombshell that someone in the house was judged inadequate for space travel. Was that Selene? Is any of this real? We can also encounter another house scene at this point.
Am I not the only thing that can enter here?
When we look back at the monumental success of the first cruise, tragic car accident occurred in the Okanagan Wenatchee landing. It is impossible to divorce the forest. Although authorities have yet to identify the mission's significance in itself from the effects the cause, as road conditions were optimal, the car broke through a guardrail and plunged witnessing world into lake. The driver, the collective and conscious understanding, has suffered major spinal injuries. Her daughter, miraculously, of humankind's place on Earth. And thereby the universe originated from the moment we stepped upon the surface of another celestial body, survived unharmed.
They definitely turned up the spook factor with that one, and that news report was so incredibly important. There was a crash. The daughter survived unharmed, but the driver was left with major spinal injuries, and Selene then calls the astronaut Mother. When Selene next encounters a xenoglyph, we can see just how unreliable of a narrator she's becoming. She may never have in fact been a reliable narrator. As we gather the ciphers for the xenoglyphs in Act 2, the translation accuracy actually goes down, as what Selene is reading becomes more and more centered on her. When fully translated, but with a 1% accuracy, memories of the family are severed. Leprosy of the mind that sees an astronaut that may or may not be there outside the car. Constantly on the verge of reaching Helios, watching me enter the house before he descends the staircase. The way forward is bad to Selene, and it's locked with 2 keys, so she needs to explore the nearby corridors to find them. On our way through, we can once again enter the house.
I'll save this for later. Still need to play quietly.
Hi, sweetheart. I'm not coming home. But I left your favorite dinner lying at the bottom of the refrigerator, okay? If you heat it up for 8 minutes and 36 seconds, everything will be just fine. Just fine. Just fine. Just fine. See you soon.
I want to tell you a story about one of the captain's adventures. Many centuries ago, he met Her Majesty, Twin Rainbow Coral Queen, and they hugged Abyssal Lights extra tight. The end. What do you think? It's so cool, right? It is cool. Centuries ago, Majesty, Coral Queen, hugged extra tight. Otto! Look. Look. It's Otto.
Well, that definitely pulled on the heartstrings a bit. Rather than being from Selene's perspective, we were Helios. No, not the spaceship, a small boy who really just wanted some attention. But he was forced to tiptoe around his own house. We get more confirmation the astronaut is someone from this household as well. Finally, I want to just point out the use of numbers in this scene. On the phone, Selene mentions that you need to cook for 8 minutes 36 seconds. The clock is stuck at 8:36, and the radio is also on station 8:36. And also, the child's homework on the table has the 3 digits repeating on it. We don't have enough information to break this down just yet, but it's obviously a very important number. Finally, Selene manages to take down one of the Guardians and obtains a key. 1 down, 1 more to go. But first, we need to stop at an archive. The display in this room shows a tree made of eyes, a bed being slowly consumed by tentacles, and the mass unaliving of sentience. After finally obtaining the second key, Selene is able to open the door. Upon entering the tower, we can find a psych eval log from Selene's perspective.
Why has my transfer been delayed? I have ways to deal with that. Delusions? No, they're helping me stay balanced. I've made a lot of progress. What is everyone expecting to find? If they shine a light at me, they'll see the shadow they expect every time. I remember that day.
There is also another xenoglyph in this room. I see through a rearview mirror darkly, plummeting into a lake of madness that scarred the underwater depths. It would have been better if certain fiends had been born. Mother lied about the joy, there is only pain. That's such a dark xenoglyph, and it kind of gives us some insight we'll get into later. For now, though, in the next room over is another xenoglyph. This endless song bleeds out into space, the inescapable ascent from the abyss of self and the planet, where I found Hyperion waiting upon the spire, bound to an organ. I never spoke to him afterwards or heard his music again. Also I mean, to be fair, most of the xenoglyphs are important. I'm not going to point out which ones are important. They're all pretty important. Finally ascending the tower, Selene can confront Hyperion, the source of the music. After defeating Hyperion, Selene collects the fractured key to access the gateway down below. This gateway takes Selene to a frozen cave. Upon exiting, she comments that the coordinates are the same as the desert. How long were we away for the biome to change this drastically? It went from a scorching desert to the Arctic? What happened here? Upon entering the spire, we can see a pool of water leading down. Selene's current objective is to descend into the abyss, but she isn't equipped, so she'll need to unlock the nearby door first. A nearby log gives Selene a purpose for descending into the pit.
This is where the hive mind retrofitted their autonomous machines, altering each one with a new purpose. Kill the severed brethren. I still remember that phrase. And I feel myself altering too. Then it becomes irresistible. If I can reach the depths, I can destroy what destroys me. I'm stronger than the severed and the cycle.
There's also a xenoglyph in this room. I witnessed the Ica waterfall, hollow limbs extending outwards. The creator destroyer sunk into the pool. Regret was drowned there, with a suppressed memory of a wheelchair that awaits at the end. Its name is at the beginning. On her way, Selene finds a locked room, one that contains another piece of hive mind tech. Now she can walk over those red pools without being dragged down by the tentacles. On her way, she finds another xenoglyph. I was rejected from Olympus. Our family split apart. I rose from the waters of the Okanagan Wenatchee Styx. I apologize for butchering that pronunciation. It was hard. But there was no room for blood up in the stars. I buried and left them behind, but the astronaut was always following me. And they really bundled up the xenoglyphs together in this area. Listen to the silence, deeper than Hades and blacker than Tartarus. The destroyer went into the darkness and I must follow. The universal grave is where my release is found. I will pass through it to confront the astronaut. While searching for the key, Selene encounters a small version of the Heart of Darkness. Of course, Selene goes to put her hand in it, like she does with everything, and a copy of her hand snatches out at her. Seriously, why does she have to touch everything? Like, her initial response to anything she finds is, I'm going to put my hand in it. Eventually, while collecting the keys, Selene will stumble upon the archive for this area. This archive is heavily about the Severed and Hive Mind's attempts at ascension. One through building automatons and one through metamorphosis, trying to climb to the height of the Creator Destroyer, and the war that came between them due to this. After finally collecting all the keys, Selene is able to open the Hadal Vault. Prepared for yet another boss fight, she instead finds a tomb and the ability to survive the crushing depths. Also, just as a side note, she started calling the Xenotep technology from the gods. Selene's mental state is kind of degrading at this point, understandably. Now, properly equipped, Selene can dive down into my personal favorite zone, the Abyss. I know some won't like it, but I'm a big old nerd for underwater stuff, so I just really enjoyed this area aesthetically. And at the very bottom is our first xenoglyph. White Shadow, ignorant of inevitable, this time I act without thought and reach for the lost child. My negligence is the reason I am here. Shifting black shadows are my guilt in the shape of an astronaut that became my cosmic afterbirth. While traveling ever deeper into the abyss, Selene eventually finds the Delphic Visor, which allows her to see orbs that create platforms for her to venture deeper. She also finds a log that once again talks of the Watcher in the Deep offering godhood to the Severed.
Beyond the crack in the world, the sleeper of the deep ascends in dangerous dreams. It offered the hive mind answers, but severed them instead. It offered the severed godhood, but crippled them instead. But it has not yet offered me anything. Why does it remain silent? After everything, am I still unworthy?
Now capable of seeing, Selene can cross the abyss to the tower where she can plunge further down. At the gateway to the tower holding the key, Selene finds another xenoglyph. There must be a way to reconnect with my lost life, yet it is already gone like the astronaut, who was waiting in the fog. Perhaps next time I'll have the strength to ignore it. Helios lies shattered and I must put him back together again. Didn't say again, I just got my wires crossed with that other creepy game series that has a lot of theories done on it. We're not descending into that madness. After fighting just genuinely one of the worst enemies in the game, seriously, I'd rather fight any of the bosses than these things. Most of the bosses I can do like hitless at this point. These things, it's always a toss-up whether it kills me. Selene recovers the key to the final tower, and after unlocking it, she can proceed even deeper to fight Ophion. Once Selene overcomes Ophion, she is free to proceed to the center of the abyss. There's a strange light coming from down here, though.
I remember everything now. I know why I deserve to be here. The crash. That's why I belong. It's always the crash I return to.
Selene's car is down here? And she's talking about the crash we saw before, or at least a crash. We'll get into that. She'll need to push on to confront the source. Here, at the very bottom, is the Heart of Darkness and something else.
you see the white shadow?
Well, that was a whole lot to unpack, right? Selene, or Thea, was driving who we can assume was Helios before driving off the edge of a bridge due to the astronaut appearing, and we can't forget Chaos. Its name is mentioned in like one bit of official art and one note from the DLC. It's actually spelled Xaoc, similar to how it is in Greek, but I'm just going to pronounce it as Chaos because it's easier. Also, did you catch the clock on the dashboard? It was 8:36. That was the time of the crash. Selene hasn't ended the cycle yet though, and to do that she'll need to gather the sun fragments. This requires Selene to go back through both acts, searching for the 6 fragments, one for each area.
A moment of hesitation. Now he's gone, and I remain. Did I even survive the initial impact? What a horrifying life I've walked into. I turn around and notice the front door is already closed behind me, before I was even aware that my hand had locked the deadbolt. Mother, I'm home.
Whilst on her journey to collect the fragments of the sun, Selene will encounter the house once again.
Someone else is here.
I'll be describing the first part so as not to get like copyright strike to oblivion. Selene plays a vinyl of the Don't Fear the Reaper song, commenting that her mum always hated it, before going out of the room to see it had summoned the astronaut. Then, once more, we're Helios.
I couldn't latch the other one. Octo, we need to leave. Where are you? Shh, quiet, quiet. Don't let the monster hear. Octo? Octo? Octo knows not to ever come here. Never. Octo! The dark will drink you. Octo! Come here. Oh, Octo! Don't disappear again. Oh. The monster is waking up. We gotta hide. Help me find the submarine's entrance. We have to escape, Octo. Octo? Octo? Octo! Octo! No. 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 help her? I'm not scared.
I destroyed Helios. That means I'm the cause of everything. Of course. I understand now.
I was not expecting that sudden horror section with Helios, or that Selene was the one to shoot down her own ship in one of her many, many cycles. Finally, after a lot of searching, seriously, I cannot describe how bad my RNG was at getting the right rooms for some of these fragments. Selene completed the sun and just needs to take it home now.
Mother, I'm home. Did I unlatch this? I regret what happened, but you deserved it. We must forget to remember. We must leave to return. We must die to live. All this time. Why did you seem so frightening when you were so much less? We were both broken.
The basement everyone has been scared of till now contained a wheelchair. And now the house has reverted back into some architecture more in fitting with the area. Was it ever even a house in the first place? It just looks like some rocks that have been stacked together now. Now Selene has the key for the car. She needs to get back down there.
I told you to leave me alone.
Selene.
That was an ending, right? The wheelchair, unsurprisingly, at this point was Fafia, Selene's mother. She had become monstrous in Selene's eyes, and we get confirmation that Selene abandoned Helios down in the water. But the real big reveal is that Selene was the astronaut that's been following herself this entire time. Thanks for watching, guys. Don't forget to like, and wait, you thought we were done? We still have to ascend the Tower of Sisyphus, and then I need to explain exactly what the hell is going on here. At the gate to the tower, Selene finds a xenoglyph. We seek the Tower of Sisyphus before we succumb to the call. We choose to die rather than be disconnected forever. The endless heights must hold a way to release. And then through the door, Selene finally sees the tower, extending to unknown heights above. Upon entering the tower, a room off to the right contains a new archive with a xenoglyph. The dissolution was their own making. We heard the call from Citadel fatally, but the connection was no more. They fell where they stood, leaving us alone, and a scout log.
Scout log, Atropos. The tower is visible from the crash site. I cannot see the summit yet. I feel compelled to go there, to uncover what it conceals. Why it calls to me.
Was the fall of this entire race something to do with Selene? Looking around the room at the displays, we can see a lot of mentions of not being able to communicate and a push that started the war. Bear that in mind. The nearby xenoglyph really spells it out for us. The fall was not our intention. We spoke, but they did not hear. We approached with offerings, but they stepped back and pulled us with them. After that, they shut us out, and the war began. And just before she climbs the tower, Selene finds the last xenoglyph. The chasm between us, the gap never bridged. Needing mother, hating mother, the offering of flowers, the impossible embrace. I must become her, ascended and alone. The last one, once again, was more focused on Selene than the Atropians. Now, in the tower, it's mainly just doing the same bits over and over again, so we'll be touching on the important parts. The gameplay loop is pretty straightforward. You just go through rooms and just keep ascending. That's pretty much it. Then there's a boss every 20 levels. Every 20 levels, there's a boss called Algos, the Architect, but we'll introduce him later on when I think it's relevant. Upon dying for the first time, Selene will wake up at the base of the tower with a curious new addition to the room. There's some kind of hospital bed in the corner. Upon lying in the bed, it works the same way as the house, transporting Selene into a morgue attached to a hospital.
I've been here before. Broken. Restored. Empty.
Selene remembers this hospital, and we soon see why as her mother appears in her ghastly form, in a wheelchair, before locking herself in a room.
Why isn't this?
Selene tries to offer some white poppies, her mother's favourite, but she drops the vase and it smashes, causing the poppies to disappear. Also, the posters in this area will tell a lot as we progress. For example, the poster that appears that's saying that Selene is now a mother, she isn't a mother and she's now her own mother. We'll see a lot of similar themes through the tower.
A threshold. A doorway. Where next?
Now, upon entering the tower, Selene will be able to find poppies, and each one will progress the story in the hospital. She needs to get 6 to get to the end like she originally had. Whilst climbing, Selene can find this log from her past confirming she was pregnant with an absent partner and she didn't want her mother around for the scans. It's going to be a boy and the name is a family one. Helios makes sense from a family named after Greek mythology with Selene and Thea, Helios, you know. Hyperion. The first visit to the hospital gives Selene more to look at. We have a child's comic talking about a mother, a girl, and a boy, although the boy's name is redacted. On the wall is another poster showing a boy named Alex. We can just make this out through the scribbles and his parents. The second hospital visit, we can read a newspaper article about a car crash. A woman received major spinal trauma and a child went missing. A poster on the wall talks about the child, the mother, and you all watching each other, and there's 3 matryoshka dolls nearby. My pronunciation is not great. My favourite piece is a poster on the wall that's adapted from a quit smoking sign, just trying to get Selene to quit everything. We do get the second page of the child's story too. The girl woke up without her mother or the boy and goes into the forest searching for them. On the third visit, Selene is haunted by the visions of her mother's wheelchair and a crib for a baby she really thought she wanted, but turned out to be incredibly hard for her.
I thought this was what I wanted. But it was hard. So hard. Did Mother feel the same?
We also learn that Thea was an award-winning swimmer when she was younger, but also had bright prospects in astronautics. We also get the final child's drawing. The girl hears someone calling out to her, but doesn't find them, eventually giving up and going home. Now, fully grown, deciding to fly into the sun. We finally see the degree of damage Thea suffered. She lost all control over her legs and sunk into a deep depression. Despite the painkillers she was taking, she was in a great deal of pain. This led to her not engaging with her physiotherapy, and then to her being discharged from the hospital because the doctors just didn't know what else to do for her. On the fourth visit, Selene thinks she has enough flowers, but her mother is unhappy with the amount and won't let her in.
There. Adequate. More. She wants more. But so did I.
On the fifth hospital sequence, Selene comments on how it's never enough. She needs more flowers, and when touching the wheelchair, she comments on her mother's endless need. No smile, no appreciation, just demand after demand, before losing her temper and ramming the wheelchair into the wall. This is a side of Selene we've not really seen yet. The sixth visit goes differently. Selene has all the poppies now and is able to visit her mother, who is still in her monstrous form. Selene mentions how she knows these poppies are her mother's favourite, and then they hug, with Selene stating that they never did this. And just as Selene finally gets what she always wanted, her mother disappears. And there's Chaos, watching as always. Don't worry, that isn't quite the end though. First, Selene needs to take down the third form of Algos. After defeating this final form of Algos, Selene mentions how difficult it was to fight to get to this point. There has to be some meaning for her, so she heads back to the hospital one last time. On entering the hospital, Selene realizes she's been waking up in the morgue every time, and she's surrounded by bodies. On a nearby table is an autopsy report for Theo Vassos. Selene comments that her mother saved all her smiles for Helios, so now they can be together, before resting in her mother's hospital bed.
Is this all I get? Just an empty space where she should be.
And finding an empty space where her mother should be.
A moment.
But at least she finally earned some respite from the cycle.
Break in the cycle. No pain here. This was earned.
It's not permanent though, as she's not the only version of herself to make it there. When she returns to the cycle, there's a log. After Selene left for college, her mother still kept smothering her, calling her daily with complaints and talking about how disappointed she was, never asking how Selene was or giving her encouragement. Just constant stream of negativity. Which is honestly a good summary ending for the tale. I mean, that was a hell of a ride, right? But, like, what did any of that mean? Obviously, if you watched till this point, you've seen that there are a lot of conflicting ways to interpret this. So you definitely have some questions. I have some answers. Housemarque have been purposely vague. The story is what you make of it. Every thing has multiple layers of meaning, so let's take it apart. We've gone through the story as the game presents it, and we have all the pieces. So let's just kind of, shove them together and try and make something coherent. To start off with, by now, we know that Greek mythology plays a huge part in the story. Everything has ties to it due to Selene's perception. Every main character is named after a mythological character, from the ship Helios to the bosses such as Hyperion and even Selene herself. And I'll bring up if it's relevant with the mythology as I've done previously as we get to the characters. The story can be split into several layers, which is kind of where it gets confusing. We've already gone through the surface layer of Selene and what the game shows you. The other two main bits are the story of the ancient civilization and the story of Selene's family, her flashbacks, and what the hell is the damn astronaut that's been hunting us. So let's set a scene. Let's flesh out the world first, before we look at Selene's personal story and start getting metaphorical. Ages ago, what Selene knows as the Atropians either arrived or arose on the planet of Atropos. I say arrived as a cut line from the game has Selene comment on them arriving and wondering where their ships were. The only evidence I can find for this though is on the wiki, and I've not managed to find the files myself. But honestly, I prefer this. I think it flows better, and some of the xenoglyphs do more sure that they kind of arrived and had to deal with the wildlife themselves as well. So I do lean towards this. It doesn't really change the story if they arrived or if they were born on this planet, honestly. But if you can find any evidence for that, please let me know down below. And also, if I'd be happy to talk about it because I'd like to know how I do this stuff for myself in the future. So, the Atropians were called to this planet, the same as Selene was. And just as Selene did, they discovered the mineral obolite. This miracle mineral was present in everything, from the rocks under their feet to the native wildlife. Given the amount of radiation and power contained within Obolite, the effects should be detrimental. But instead, they're beneficial, indicating either an insanely complex evolutionary process or intentional engineering. Also, side note, we can make the assumption the base word for Obolite is obolus, which in ancient Greek was a silver coin worth 1/6 of a drachma. Ties into how Selene is interpreting everything through Greek mythology, and also how we spend Obolite to get upgrades. Not super important to the story. I just thought it was neat, and it just kind of shows more of how like Selene is literally viewing everything through this Greek mythology lens that she has. Anyway, they used this to propel their technology through leaps and bounds, eventually going into a hive mind and beginning to build protections from the wildlife, like the turrets and automatons that Selene had the lovely experience of having to battle throughout her entire journey. These were most likely originally to protect against the wildlife, although the fact the turrets fight alongside them now indicates either their programming was corrupted or they were created with a different target in mind. As the hive mind was paving their way to apotheosis through the will of the many, some would start to become disillusioned and have strange dreams that called them down into the abyss, following a signal. Down in the deepest parts of Atropos, those hive minds who descended found chaos and became severed from their brethren. Some of these, like Frike, would return as ascended ones. The severed were led out into the Crimson Waste by Ixion after becoming shunned by the hive mind, where Ixion ascended the mountain to strike down the Creator Destroyer. They were unsuccessful and became imprisoned here. And then the rest of the severed began to worship the Creator Destroyer, wrapping themselves as if ready for a metamorphosis. Unable to communicate anymore and seeing a madness in the severed, the hive mind pushed the severed away and locked the ascended in the vaults. They could do nothing to the dreams of madness that leaked from the cells, though, which, over time, due to the inability that they both had to communicate, drove the severed into a frenzy, eventually leading them into attacking the walls of the hive mind. This resulted in massive losses to both sides. However, the hive mind was mainly trying to contain rather than kill the severed. The severed, however, just kept pushing through the defenses until all that remained in the citadel were their bodies, the automatons, and the last surviving sentient nemesis. This is how things would remain until Selene comes into the picture. Now, Selene's story is fractured and complicated to say the least. She is the epitome of an unreliable narrator. All you have to do is look at the information gathered in Act 2. For example, the xenoglyphs. The more you collect, the further the translation actually gets. They become more centered on Selene. But there is a coherent story in there, and to decipher it, we need to remember the main themes. Cycles. We start back with Selene's childhood. Thea Vassos, an accomplished swimmer, was obsessed with becoming an astronaut. However, she had two children, Selene and Alex. Selene's father was a talented musician who abandoned them shortly after Selene's birth. Alex was the planned first child and showered in love. Selene was a mistake, but Thea did her best to raise both children alone. While traveling one day, the trio were in a car crash, plunging into the icy depths of a lake. Thea damaged her spine in the crash, but she was still a strong swimmer, and despite the damage she was causing herself, she managed to save Selene, but not Alex. This very understandably left Selene with a fear of water. Due to her mother's actions, Selene was miraculously completely fine. Thea, though, became bound to a wheelchair and sank into a deep depression, barely even engaging with her physical therapy. The doctors were at a loss, but released her as there was nothing else for them to do. Now back at home with Selene, having lost her son, her career, and being incapable of walking, all of her attention, her hate and pain, was directed at Selene. Selene's life revolved around her mother, always needing to come look after her due to her own crushing guilt. She pushed Selene to achieve what she couldn't, guilt-tripping her. This obviously made Selene resent her mother, but put a relentless drive in her to get away. Far, far away. However, even after leaving for college, Selene's mother would continue to call her to berate her and complain about everything, leaving Selene feeling like her mother's hand was just still around her throat, suffocating her. Later on, after getting her astrophysics degree, Selene met someone. Together, they had a child named Helios before her partner disappeared out of their life, leaving Selene to raise Helios on her home while still having dreams of becoming an astronaut. This is the cycle repeating. Selene became heavily depressed, moved back in with her mother to look after both her and Helios. The two top bedrooms were used by Selene and Helios, with Thea being placed in the basement despite her physical disabilities. This just increased her reliance upon Selene. Due to the pressures of caring for both mother and son, Selene began to see a therapist and was prescribed antidepressants. Selene was a cold and absent mother, more focused on her career than Helios. She felt overwhelmed and numb. She even resented Helios for the tether he now resembled. She was just a mother now, rather than the pioneer she wanted to be. This resulted in Selene ignoring Helios, with Helios desperately trying to get her to give him any kind of praise or attention. He made up stories to tell her, crying when she just ignored him. Thea, on the other hand, adored Helios, maybe seeing some of Alex in him and a second chance. Selene comments on it, saying that she saved all of her smiles from her life for Helios. This didn't sit well with Selene. She had been so desperate for her mother's love for so many years, but now the child that she couldn't feel anything for was getting her mother's love. She banned Helios from the basement and seeing her mother. All the while, Selene really struggled with being a mother. She never got that warm, loving feeling her mother told her she should. She finally understood why her mother always said she was a noisy and insolent child. She just wanted some peace. One night, while out driving, Helios asked Selene about the White Shadow, just as an Apollo-era astronaut appears in front of them, causing the car to swerve and crash into a lake. Selene panics, but once again manages to escape. Looking back at Helios, she abandons him, leaving him to drown. On her way to the surface, Selene sees a vision of chaos. Selene isn't the same as her mother. She barely manages to escape due to her thalassophobia and the damage she suffered. The physical trauma she suffered was enough to cause her to develop heterochromia. In a moment of heightened emotions, as her mother once again suffocated Selene with her need, she pushed her, and Thea fell out of the wheelchair and hit her head against the floor. This scene would begin to play out multiple times over the following years, causing Thea to develop traumatic encephalopathy. I probably butchered that pronunciation. It'll be on the screen. This resulted in an even greater reliance on Selene, and her guilt again just increased. After all, if her mother hadn't saved her or had saved her brother, maybe the damage wouldn't have been as bad, or maybe she'd have responded better to the physiotherapy. Selene remained stuck there till Thea died. The two were never able to reconcile, neither one capable of saying sorry even at the very end. But she was free now, finally able to pursue her life goal, the thing she'd been training for since she was a child. Selene enters Astra, and despite her past, the guilt she's carried, she numbs herself to it by focusing on her goals, throwing herself entirely into it, and somehow manages to pass the psych eval despite a history of seeing a therapist and taking antidepressants, and the just truckloads of trauma she has at this point. After some opposition, because it wasn't a clean ride, Selene got into the very kind of mission she wanted, a deep space exploration, as far from Earth as she could get, but first, she had one last thing to do. Selene had lost her son, her brother, and her mother. She barely knew her father. Her partner abandoned her. The only thing left on Earth to bind her was the house, so she burned it down. Finally free of any earthly ties, Selene set off to explore the stars. She was joined by Emily Sansa and Cecilia Cara Scott, both of whom were excited to be exploring for the adventure, unlike Selene, who just wanted to be away from Earth. While out in the depths of space, they received a signal called White Shadow. Upon landing, Selene was much closer to the source of Chaos's power, meaning it could influence her better, much like it did with the Severed. Now, you'll have to bear with me due to the timey-wimey bullcrap. A lot of things happened that then made it possible for them to happen, so this part of the story of Chaos is, well, chaotic. But I'll make it as straightforward as possible. Also, a real quick side note, now we know about Helios, how depressing is it that every time Selene leaves the area, it says Helios abandoned? That really just tugs on your heartstrings when you realize what's going on there. To understand the last part of the story, we need to try and understand the motives of an unknowable, ineffable, eldritch being. Luckily, I am good at that. I like to think it's honestly trying to help in its own messed up way. A major theme for the Severed and the Hive Mind is metamorphosis and apotheosis. Those creatures touched by chaos start to become like it. The Severed start to develop tentacle arms. Most of the wildlife is made up of tentacles, and everything is filled with oberlight. Remember how I mentioned it seemed to be created for a purpose? It seems like Chaos created it and infused the entire planet as a step to elevate any sentience that came to the planet. Chaos slowly tries to make them more like it. Unfortunately, what is the mind of a mortal when faced with the truths of a god? The Severed were broken, and so it needed a more suitable heir. And here's Selene, someone who should be broken, so very broken, but with an unwavering determination, someone who could press through the madness. Selene releases Chaos at the end of Act 2, which kickstarts the entire timeline due to the time-bending nature of Atropos. Once Selene accepts the process in the true ending, she becomes the Apollo astronaut, an agent of Chaos, to continue the cycle. She was the creator-destroyer for the sentients, as she was the reason they were able to advance so quickly, but she was also the cause of their downfall by releasing Chaos and her signal, the White Shadow, which called those who became the Severed down to the depths. This would also explain why the turrets don't target the wildlife. They were specifically designed to target the creator-destroyer, Selene. Quick side note, Selene was a titan in Greek mythology, and one of the ship logs details how she helped Zeus to wipe out the evidence of the other titans were cleansing wave after the war. Just like how Selene helps wipe out the sentients when they're unable to reach apotheosis. She was also her own demon, causing the car crash, without which she would have been bound to Earth with her son Helios, to never set foot on Apropos. She watches herself navigating the planet, occasionally coming forward to help herself navigate her own trauma through the use of the house. We are left with questions though. Does Selene ever actually reach apotheosis? And we don't know. The story is left with Selene stuck in the same self-perpetuating time loop where she, as the agent of Chaos, kept trapping herself in the cycle. Whether it's becoming the Apollo astronaut and causing the crash, or when she shoots Helios out of the sky, Selene herself is still bound by her guilt. We can see from the final ending of the tower, though, she's making progress, and she's finally able to take just a moment to rest in peace. Something she's not done since she was a child before the first crash. Honestly, we could even make an argument that Chaos is Selene, once she has managed to achieve apotheosis, and is just doing this to ensure her own existence, or even that she is just a part of Chaos experiencing itself. It could go a few ways, but it's just another layer to the cycle that Selene has trapped herself in. Of course, the game is heavily, and I mean very heavily, filled with metaphors, from abandoning Helios to keeping herself in a cycle of mental torture due to her guilt, even perpetuating the same cycle of abuse she experienced as a child. Selene heavily begins to project herself to the history of the Atropians, from the xenoglyphs becoming about her, to the symbolism in their inability to communicate, and the final push that broke the relationship between them. I mean, if you can't see what's going on there between her mother and her, you know, it's quite obvious. Hopefully that's given you some of the facts of Returnal, so you can come up with your own theories. This was a genuine blast to tear into. Like, I spent hours scouring item descriptions, immersing myself in the world, and trawling through Reddit threads from years ago. I genuinely really enjoyed Returnal and its multifaceted story. If you're like me, and the fact you've watched this far probably means you are, this story is one I highly recommend you dive into and experience yourself. There isn't a concrete set storyline, and it's a lot about how you interpret the multitude of metaphors in the game. I presented the story in this way so you could see the game yourself before I went into my thoughts on the story. Some things are fact, but a lot is left up to our personal interpretation. And I didn't go through absolutely everything. There's plenty of logs and item descriptions we haven't dived into today. I will acknowledge the other main theory, with everything being in Selene's head, but that just doesn't sit right with me due to the amount of lore put into the alien race. And honestly, the Lovecraft angle, it just sits better with me than the whole "and then it was all in her head" trope. And you know what? That's okay. This story is more about what you take from it and how you see it than there being a full set story. And I enjoy that. It even adds to the Lovecraftian theme as how can we, as mere three-dimensional mortals, understand a story laid out by a higher being? A lot of Lovecraft stories end with the protagonist insane or wondering if what they experienced was even real, due to the effects of being near something so incomprehensible to us. And that's why I love the Story of Returnal. I wish there was more for me to dig into. Wait, there's a comic, an art book with lore coming out? Looks like I might need to revisit this. Let me know down below if you want me to dig into those and see what kind of story elements we can get from those as well in the future. But for now, that's my take on the Story of Returnal. Let me know down below what theories you have, and if you want more content like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and let me know any other media I should check out. I'm thinking of branching out into some IRGs along with these game stories, so it'd be good for me to know if anyone's kind of interested in that kind of thing. If anyone has any recommendations to start with, I will be entirely open to that. Just let me know down below. But thanks for watching, and I shall catch you on the next one.